President and Mr. Vice President. As you announced, we are very pleased that we are ahead of schedule on delivering the economic impact payments. These were what was known as the checks in the mail that we want to deliver in direct deposit. This is ahead of schedule. We started processing those last Friday. We expect that over 80 million hardworking Americans will get the direct deposit by this Wednesday. And we know how important that is to all of those hardworking Americans, many of which are at home not working at the moment. If you do not receive them by Wednesday, on Wednesday we will be launching at irs.gov. Click on irs.gov, go to Get Your Payment. If you filed a tax return in 2018 and 19 or 19, have that information available. You'll be able to ID yourself. You'll be able to put in your direct deposit information, and within several days, we will automatically deposit the money into your account. We want to do as much of this electronically as we can. It's very important in this day and age. It's more secure, and you don't have to go to the bank. If you are a Social Security beneficiary, you do not need to do anything. You will get a direct deposit. If you have not filed and did not need to file a 2018 and 19 return, you can go to irs.gov now and enter your information and authenticate yourself. So again, we are very pleased that that is ahead of schedule. I'd also like to announce the progress we're making on the new SBA program, the PPP. Let me just remind everybody, this is a brand new program that is now 1 week old. We have distributed and confirmed $230 billion of loans to over 4,600 lenders participating. That is multiples and multiples of anything that the SBA has ever done in 1 year before. And I especially want to thank the broad-based community banks that are participating. Again, over 4,600 banks. If you haven't had your loan processed, you will get it processed this week. As the President said, we've gone back to Congress and asked them for more money to make sure that every business has access to this. Let me also comment for the states. We are distributing out half the money this week to the states. That's a week ahead of time. And we'll deliver the other half of the money to the states next week. And then let me just finally comment, we've been working very closely with the Federal Reserve. Last week we announced expanded facilities and new facilities that total $2.3 trillion of liquidity. And in particular, I'd just like to highlight a Main Street lending facility that will be for companies between 1 worker and 10,000 people, so mid-sized businesses, and also a municipal facility for states and local governments to be able to access funds given the shortages that they have. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Do you have any questions to state, please?
Secretary Mnuchin. Thank you, sir. Both Speaker Pelosi and Minority Leader Schumer have said that they're in negotiations with you right now on additional funding for these small business loans, that package. Leader McConnell, though, has said that nothing should be added to the package, that it should just be specific to small business loans. What is the opinion of your administration? Should there be some sort of horse trading here, or should it just be small business loans?
Well, the President's view and the Vice President's, in my view, is this was a bipartisan program. This SBA program, it wasn't a Republican program, it wasn't a Democrat program, it was a bipartisan program. We've committed to small businesses. We should top up that program now. I know the Democrats want to talk about more money for hospitals and states. Right now, we're just sending the money out to the hospitals and states. They haven't come close to using that money. And I know the President and Vice President have said, once we get the SBA done, we can go into another funding bill. The President's talked about potentially adding infrastructure and other things. We think there is a likelihood we will need more money, and we will sit down and try to get a bipartisan bill. But this is important we deliver on small businesses. 50% of the people work for small businesses.
Thank you, sir.
What's the emergency that the President said you had to go for? The President said you had an emergency negotiation over this bill?
Yeah, well, because we don't want to run out of money. We've used about $220 billion of the $350 billion. We don't want to run out of that money. We don't want to create panics that people won't get it. So that's why we want to top that up, and we've asked for another $250 billion for that program. And again, let me just remind you, every dollar we spend in this program we save $1 of unemployment insurance. So even though we're asking for $250 billion, it really won't cost that much.
Could I follow up?
What are do you have concerns about lifting the guidelines too soon? I mean, what's the economic impact? I understand the economic argument for getting people back to work, obviously, but what's the economic risk of lifting them too early and seeing a spike in cases
Well,
again?
of course, there's economic risks in both directions. We reviewed with the president today a very broad list of over 100 business people that are going to help advise the president on what needs to be done to reopen the economy. We want to make sure, and again, the combination of economic impact payments, small business payments, enhanced unemployment insurance, the president made very clear we want to make sure that hardworking Americans have liquidity while we wait to reopen the government.
So do you believe the government should be reopened, or the country, excuse me, should be reopened on May 1?
I've had discussions with the president. I know he's considering it, and I believe he's going to make a decision later in the week.
Everything has to be safe.
What is your advice to the president?
My advice is as soon as it's ready to open and based upon the medical professionals, and again, we're working very closely with the president and outside business leaders to develop a plan.
I just wonder, I could ask you, Mr. President, what do you think, if you could sketch for us what reopening the economy looks like? Do you think it's going to be everything open, or do you think...
We'll be doing that over the next few days because we'll probably be making a statement about that and exactly what it looks like. I know what that looks like, but I also want to get the advice, in a sense. We have some of the biggest from every business on this council. We're actually setting up a number of different councils or committees, I guess you could call them, and we have a lot of smart people. I think that they will give us some also good advice. But no, we want to be very, very safe. At the same time, we got to get our country open.
Yeah, and I understand that, Mr. President. Do you think there is a possibility then that what you do is you open it incrementally? Do you think people will go back to restaurants, to concerts, the cinema?
I do think so. Eventually they will, yeah.
And let me ask one
I think
final...
eventually they will do that, and I think we're going to boom. I think it's going to go quickly. Our people want to get back to work, and I think there's a pent-up demand like there hasn't been in a long time. And that's why you see the stock market. I mean, to think that the stock market's at the level it is right now with all that this world and this country has gone, and look at the European Union, how badly decimated they've been. Look at other countries. Look at China, by the way. I've seen the numbers. Look at China. Look at how these countries have been just decimated by this. And to think that the stock market is at this tremendously high number, not that much, it was looking a little bleak for a while, but it hit a certain point and then started going up. I think that's a great tribute to the fact that there's a demand. Yeah.
Mr. President, thank you, sir. In regards to some of your tweets earlier today, and I think it was Steve's question, my question to you is what provision in the Constitution gives the president the power to open or close state economies? And then
numerous provisions. We'll give you a legal brief if you want.
And then we'll be looking forward to that, sir. But following up, what happens if you say, for instance, we want states to reopen, but California or New York do not open? What would you do then?
I think everybody wants to open. I mean,
So can I just ask one
I
other
guess,
thing on
that could happen, but I don't think that would happen.
It's been states that have closed, ordered schools closed. It's been states that have ordered businesses like restaurants.
That's because
and
I let
bars
that
closed.
happen. Because I would have preferred that. I let that happen. But if I wanted to, I could have closed it up. But I let that happen. And I like the way they've done it. And the 7 that remained really in sort of a semi-lockdown, if you look at those states, they've really done a very good job. They're very much different from a New York or from other places where they've been hit very hard.
You're prepared then to face what states and say, I order you to open your schools, I order you to force
Go ahead,
kids to be able to go?
Yes, Mr. President. Following up on that, there are 2 consortiums of states today, California, Oregon, Washington on the West Coast, northeastern states, totally representing about 100 million people who said they're going to cooperate and decide when to reopen.
Well, they can
those
decide,
states.
but...
Does that undermine what you're trying
No,
to do?
not at all. Let me just tell you, very simple. I'm going to put it very simply. The President of the United States has the authority to do what the President has the authority to do, which is very powerful. The President of the United States calls the shots. If we weren't here for the states, you would have had a problem in this country like you've never seen before. We were here to back them up, and we've more than backed them up. We did a job that nobody ever thought was possible. It's a decision for the President of the United States. Now, with that being said, we're going to work with the states because it's very important. You have local governments. They're pinpointed. It's really, you talk about, it's like a microchip. They're pinpointed. We have local government that hopefully will do a good job. And if they don't do a good job, I'd step in so fast. But no, they can't do anything without the approval of the President of the United States. Go ahead, Liz.
So if some states refuse to reopen and you order them to, the 10th Amendment to the Constitution says all powers that don't reside in the President or the Congress reside in the states. How do you overcome that?
Well, if some states refuse to open, I would like to see that person run for election. They're going to open. They're going to all open.
The ballot box.
I think that's something that's not going to happen. They want to open. They have to open. They have to get open. Every one of those states, the people want to go and they want to. Now, some are in a different situation. You have, I won't name states now, but I will over the next 2 or 3 days. I'm going to be very specific. But you have some states where this is not the kind of a problem that it is in New York or Louisiana or Michigan or other places that got hit very hard. Illinois got hit very hard. But all states want to open, and they want to open as soon as possible, but they want to open safely, and so do I. Yeah, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. Today, the French President Emmanuel Macron said that he will keep the shutdown in France till the middle of May. Does that mean that the U.S. will keep the ban
No,
on
France
flights
got hit
from
very
Europe?
hard. France got hit very hard, and again, he has to do what he has to do. He's a friend of mine. But France, Spain has just been decimated. You look at what's happened in Italy, it's a very well-known fact, what happened in Italy. No, they were hit very hard.
Question for Secretary Mnuchin. Has everybody that you would like to have, the 100 business people on the Economic Council, have they all been invited already? Have they all agreed to
They haven't been invited yet. We just reviewed the names with the President today for him
And
to
are they
sign
from
off.
all sectors?
Yes,
Energy?
there's verticals, so every single area of the economy we wanted to be represented.
Great. One other thing, is there anything else needs to be done to work on industry, oil industry jobs, to save oil industry jobs after the deal this past weekend?
Well, I think there's always things. So we're working with Larry Kudlow. I mean, we have
Specifically that needs to be done?
economic plans for every single part of the economy. Obviously, in the case of the oil industry, they've been hit especially hard because you've had both the supply issue and you've had the demand issue.
Have you figured out the bailout money for the airlines, what the allocations for the airlines?
So I'm pleased to say we've worked very hard. I think, as you probably have seen, we put out a press release that we have now had discussions with almost all the airlines. I've personally had discussions with all the major airline CEOs. We specifically created an exception for small airlines that we could process very quickly, and I think you'll see very quickly decisions coming out. I'm very pleased with the discussions we've had.
We've had very good discussions.
Secretary?
Yes.
Do you foresee a need for a phase 4 stimulus, or is this
Steve, I just want to say we have had
discussion.
discussion. Wait, excuse me 1 second. We've had very good discussions with the airlines. Very good discussions.
Is it possible to reopen the economy on May the 1st?
I don't want to say that. You'll be hearing over the next few days.
Phase 4 stimulus earlier than that?
Let me just
Do you
comment.
still
I'm gonna answer
see a
your
need for a
question.
phase 4? Is this push in lieu of another stimulus?
Okay, so again, let me just comment. I mean, Congress on a bipartisan basis approved an unprecedented amount of money to help American workers and American business because it was no fault of their own that business was closed down. We have been very diligently executing on that. You know, everybody said it was going to take months to get people money. We are executing very quickly. We created a whole new SBA program in a week. Our job right now is to execute the $2.3 billion, which we can add several $1 trillion with the Fed. The one area we are particularly concerned about is the small business program. Quite frankly, it's even more incredibly popular and successful than we anticipated. So the president wants to be very clear we have money for that. And once we get done with that, we will review with the president. If there is more money that needs to be to support this economy, to support hardworking Americans, we will work with Congress to get that
And
done.
Steve, do you want to talk about phase 4?
So phase 4, the president has talked about infrastructure for a long period of time. We've talked about, to the extent that the hospitals need more money because of the medical issues, we'll monitor that. We want to make sure there are incentives for restaurants, entertainment, people to get back to those types of things. So we'll be looking at very specifically provisions to stimulate parts of the economy. Some of them may be money issues, some of them may be regulatory issues.
Mr. President.
Just to clarify your understanding of your authority vis-a-vis governors, just to be very specific,
For instance, if a governor issued a stay-at-home
When you say my authority, the president's authority, not mine, because it's not me. This is, when somebody's the president of the United States, the authority is total. And that's the way it's got to be.
The authority is total.
It's total. It's total.
Your authority
And the
is
governors
total.
know that.
So if a
The governors know
if a
that. Now,
governor
you have a
issued
couple of bands
stay-at-home order,
excuse me,
could you just-
excuse me. You have a couple.
Could you rescind that order?
You have a couple of bands of Democrat governors, but they will agree to it. They will agree to it. But the authority of the President of the United States having to do with the subject we're talking about is total.
Mr. Vice President, do you agree with that?
Yeah, please, go ahead.
Mr. President's authority is total.
Go ahead, please.
One of the things you spoke, we saw in your video about, was the travel ban from Europe. As part of reopening America, do you want to reopen the borders so that people from Europe, from the UK,
At the right time.
how soon do you
A
think
very
we
good
are-
question,
how-
actually. Well, I'm going to have to take a look. I wouldn't say Italy's doing great right now, and I wouldn't say Spain's doing great right now. And we just heard that France is extending its stay inside order, right? They've extended it. I just see that, and I think for a short period of time. But no, when they're back, we want to do it very quickly, but we want to make sure everything's good. No, right now we have a very strong ban. We're going to keep it that way until they heal.
Weeks, months, what would you...
Well, I can't tell you that. I have to see how are they doing. I mean, France just went for another 2 days, for another 2 weeks. We have to see, John.
So Dr. Fauci said that you took his advice on the question of mitigation. He made the recommendation, you accepted it, you put it into place. As you make this next decision, which,
Well, I'm
as
not
you
sure
have said,
who, John, I'm not sure who really gave me advice on the ban. I think I
not the
took,
ban,
I think
talking
I
about
took
the
my own
mitigation,
advice on the ban. I don't know.
The social distancing I'm talking about, the shutting down,
Okay.
not of travel, but,
Okay, fine.
but of activity. So my question is, as you make this next decision, which you have said may be the most difficult or important decision of your presidency, will you assure the American people that you will again take the advice of the doctors, of Dr. Fauci, of Dr. Birx? Will you take the advice of the health experts before you
I
do
will,
that?
and many other people also. But I will absolutely take their advice.
Would you go
Please,
against
ahead.
their Would you go against their recommendation if they say you need another 15 or 30
I don't
days?
think it would be
you-
likely because I think we're not very far from being on the same page. Please.
Yes, Mr. President, one thing that Governor Cuomo said today is that states do not have the capacity to do mass COVID-19 testing ahead of a reopening.
Well, they have to do it. Look,
He
they're
says he
supposed to
can't
be doing
purchase
it.
the diagnostic tests or
Yeah.
equipment and needs federal help.
Well,
So
they-
will the
they may
states
need
get
help,
that?
but-
Will they get it?
But they're there. They're on ground. They've got local mayors, local representatives. They have people that do it.
Supplies.
And what we did last time is unprecedented. We literally rebuilt tests. We rebuilt a whole industry because we inherited nothing. What we inherited from the previous administration was totally broken, which somebody should eventually say. Not only were the cupboards bare, as I say, but we inherited broken testing. Now we have great testing. I just left the top executives at Abbott. Who would have thought that would have happened where they have such a great test as that? And in fact, what I'll do, I think, unless you have any further questions for the Secretary of the Treasury, do you have anybody for Steve? Anybody? Is that for the Secretary of the Treasury? If it's for me, we can wait.
For Secretary.
We have to get him back to work, okay?
Yes, sir. For Secretary Mnuchin, a question from one of my colleagues who's not able to be in the room. They're curious about the SBA rule that prevents small casinos from getting some of this relief. Is that something that you're taking a look at? Is there going to be a change to
So
that?
not small casinos, but there are such things as small taverns and restaurants that have literally, small gaming things, and we are coming out with some additional guidance on that. But I want to be clear, it's not small casinos.
Thanks, sir.
Secretary Mnuchin?
Secretary,
Yes.
there was a letter that some House Republicans sent this weekend about liquidity for mortgage servicers.
Yes.
Can you explain what you're looking at on that front?
Sure. So I think I commented on this a week or so ago. We had a subcommittee task force at EVSOC that specifically studied this issue. We have all the appropriate people on it. Ginnie Mae has automatically taken some action. We've had conversations with the FHFA as to what they're going to do for Fannie and Freddie. And we've said that to the extent they need certain authorities from the Treasury, we will accommodate that. So we're very aware of the issue. Quite frankly, we had been studying this issue way before COVID and had concerns about some of these non-bank servicers not being well capitalized. But we're going to make sure that the market functions properly.
Thank you, sir. We have seen in a number of these relief bills that Democrats and Republicans have been able to push forward different non-coronavirus specific funding priorities. Are you trying to keep funding specific to coronavirus? And then if there are going to be other additions, for instance, a change to labor rules is something that many on the left wanted. Some on the right are wondering if they should also, if you should also be pushing for, their preferred add-ons.
Well, I think our expectation has always been this is COVID related. Some people have a rather broad view of what COVID related is because it has impacted almost every single business. I think the president has talked about the Kennedy Center, which is a good institution. Obviously, that was not the major priority of the bill, but they were hit with COVID related. But no, the president has instructed we want to be very specific in the next bill. It's COVID-related items.
Well, we didn't want to do the Kennedy Center, just so you understand, and that was done. The Democrats wanted it in. We didn't want that, but they wanted it in, and we had to agree in order to get something done for the workers. But we want this to be for the workers and for companies that employ the workers. That's what we're looking for. We're not looking for extraneous nonsense.
It's been reported that you argued at the time of the China ban was being discussed, that was too disruptive to the global economy. Is that accurate?
Yeah, let me be clear. I had nothing to do with the China ban. I wasn't on the task force at the time. I'm not even sure I think I was traveling at the time, but I never had any, I was not part. I did become very active and after the China ban, but that report in the New York Times was not accurate. I was not part of the task force at that time, and I was not involved. Matter of fact, I think I may have been traveling.
This is a proposal, I believe, by Senator Hawley to get direct payments to employers to pay people who have been laid off and to keep people on payroll. Does the administration support that proposal?
Well, again, that is the PPP. The PPP is basically sending money to small business, 50% of American workers, to keep those people paid. And it's the most efficient way. Every dollar, as I said, we do through that, it's one less dollar of unemployment. And more importantly, we want those people to be associated with the business, so as soon as the president is ready to open up the economy, those businesses are together. We don't want those businesses to fall apart. That's why this is such a successful program.
But are
and
you
we want
talking about
Congress to remember
unemployment?
it.
You're talking about the unemployment. Sending it indirectly to the states. We would have preferred that it was sent directly to the people. The Democrats wanted it to be sent through the unemployment system, and I've talked to you about it. We have 40-year-old equipment in many of those systems. They're run by the state. But I'm hearing they're getting the money out anyway.
So some of them are, and some of the states aren't, and we encourage, we're working with the states to try to update their computers, but it's a long haul.
Okay, thank you, Steve.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Phase 4, Steve. Phase 4. Come on, Steve.
A quick question about something you just said. You said when someone is president of the United States, their authority is total. That is not true. Who
Okay,
told
you know
that?
what we're going to do? We're going to write up papers on this. It's not going to be necessary because the governors need us one way or the other, because ultimately it comes with the federal government. That being said, we're getting along very well with the governors, and I feel very certain that there won't be a problem. Yeah, please, go ahead.
Has any governor agreed that you have the authority to decide when their state
I haven't
opens
asked
back up?
anybody because
But
I
no one
don't,
has-
you know why?
no one has
Because I
said
don't
that.
have to. Go ahead, please.
But who told you the president has the total authority?
Enough, please.
You mentioned the vice president's call with the governors today. Governor Hogan of Maryland has urged your administration to ask Congress for $500 billion to help stabilize budgetary shortfalls created by coronavirus.
It's nice of Governor Hogan, very much. We appreciate Governor Hogan's statement.
Governor Cuomo said the CARES Act ignored state government
Cuomo.
revenue shortfalls. Do you support that request? And Mr.
Which
Vice
one, what
President,
did you say?
he said the CARES Act ignored the budgetary shortfalls.
Well, they're looking at things in phase 4 where they have, where they talk about states, and they're also talking about hospitals. They're talking about states who have been battered, and they're also talking about hospitals, and we're certainly willing to look at that.
Will you urge Congress on their behalf?
We'll see what we all come back with, but they are talking about states, and they're talking about hospitals. OAN.
Thank you, Mr. President. Governor of Michigan, Gretchen Whitmer, has on Thursday signed an executive order banning the sale of non-essential goods. If other states
The sale of what?
non-essential goods, she has banned the sale of non-essential goods. Many are calling this draconian, unconstitutional. As president, do you think that if other states were to follow her example in the coming weeks, that the federal government should intervene?
Well, I don't think that's going to happen. I think it's very extreme, but she's doing it, and I think it's going to be over a long way before we have to start thinking about it too much. It is strong. It's a very strong position to take. But they're making a lot of progress in Michigan, so let's see how it all works.
What is the status of the funding for the World Health Organization?
We're going to be talking about that very soon. I'm getting a full report. I'm not happy with the World Health Organization. Not happy with the World Trade Organization either. We've been ripped off by everybody. This country, for so many years, has been ripped off by everybody, whether it's a World Health or World Trade. They're like, I call them the Bobbsey twins. They look at our country. For years and years, we had people that did nothing about it. We're doing a lot about it. So we'll have a report, and we're also talking about the World Trade Organization. But we've made a lot of progress there. We're now winning cases for the first time because they know I'll leave if we don't get treated fairly. This country, our country, was at a point where we rarely, if ever, won the lawsuits within the World Trade Organization. But now we're winning a lot of them because they know I'm not playing games. We will pull out if we have to. We just won a $7 billion lawsuit, which was very nice.
Do you expect a decision this week on cutting funding for the WHO?
Yeah, I would say by the end of the week I'm going to make a decision on that. Yeah. There's right now there's a lot of things happening.
On China, why are there no consequences for China for the misinformation
How do you know
that
there
they
are no
shared?
consequences?
We've been asked, and
How
it
do you
appears
know
that
there are no
were
consequences?
What are the consequences, Mr. President,
I
for the
wouldn't tell you.
misinformation?
China will find out.
But
Why would I
people-
tell
but
you?
People are concerned that they stonewalled.
No, you started off by
that they gave
saying, why are there no
misinformation.
consequences?
You've asked this a few times, so following up on your response, why are there no
How do
consequences
you
for
know
China?
there are no
Because we've
consequences?
asked you,
You're
and
going to
you've
find
said- you've
out.
said
I
that you
wouldn't
did
tell
not
you.
have
You'd probably be the last person on earth I'd tell.
There
Go
were
ahead.
consequences.
Yeah, please.
Mr. President, actually, this is a question for Mr. Vice President. Do you agree with the President's statement and his understanding of federalism that his power is total, right, in the way that he described it? Is there anything you'd like to add or any context you'd like to add to the way he was discussing that?
I support the President's leadership under the National Emergency Declaration that he signed. We're standing before you today, the first time in American history, when all 50 states have issued emergency declarations, and the territories. This is an unprecedented time in the life of the nation. And fortunately, as presidents reflected, and our health experts will continue to reflect, because the American people have heeded the president's coronavirus guidelines for America, because state governors have taken those and implemented them, even in states where there was not a significant outbreak, and implemented additional measures as we provided them with data about cases and best practices. We're making real progress as a country.
You
But
think
make
his
no
powers are a
mistake
little bit
about
more
it.
circumscribed than total?
Well, make no mistake about it. In the long history of this country, the authority of the President of the United States during national emergencies is unquestionably plenary. You can look back through times of war and other national emergencies. And as the President said, we'll happily brief that. But in the days ahead, what the President has charged us to do is to work with our health experts. We're going to bring together an extraordinary group of American business leaders to counsel the President. And then working with the CDC, we're going to produce new guidelines based upon the data for every state and territory in this nation. We're going to give them guidance, and as the President's indicated, we'll continue to respect the leadership and partnership that we forge with every governor in America. But this is an unprecedented time. But I have to tell you, when you look at the fact, despite the heartbreaking loss of more than 22,000 Americans, when you look at the fact of what the health experts told us this could be, I think I only can feel a sense of gratitude to the American people. Gratitude to the extraordinary team that has counseled this president, the steps that President Trump has taken, the policies that governors have implemented all across America. I mean, we were discussing today at the task force that when you look at the European Union as a whole, they have nearly 3 times the mortality rate that the United States of America has today. And that is a tribute to our extraordinary healthcare workers, their dedication, their tireless work. But it's also a tribute to the fact that the American people put into practice the mitigation efforts that the President counseled the nation to do on the advice of our best scientists now more than a month ago. And our hospitals were not overwhelmed, and are not overwhelmed at this hour. And I have to tell you, standing here today, I couldn't be more proud to stand alongside this President and to be a part of this team that has served the American people during this challenging hour. And I just say to you, to every American looking on, as we see the numbers leveling and maybe even beginning to go down, I just encourage you to keep doing what you're doing, because of the sacrifices that Americans and American families have made through these mitigation efforts. You're saving lives and you're seeing our nation through this time.
Sir, did the states tell you, you've been talking to the governors quite a bit, did those coalitions of states on the West Coast and in the Northeast, did they tell you what they were going to be announcing before they announced it?
Governor Phil Murphy and the governor of Connecticut expressed today that they were going to be speaking and discussing on a regional basis what their recommendations would be. And we assured them
How's
today.
about that, though, sir?
We assured them today on our conference call with, I think, 48 governors that were with us today for the better part of an hour and a half. We told them that what the president would be producing, is directed to be produced, are additional guidelines for the states, certified by the CDC, that would inform those governors and local communities and mayors about the best way forward based on the unique circumstances that those states and those communities are facing. I think what's clear is the American people have seen the experience in Washington State, where this really all began for us, and in California, and now the extraordinary challenges in the greater New York City area, including New Jersey and Connecticut, the challenges in New Orleans and Louisiana and Detroit, still Chicago, parts of Houston. But they're also seeing that in each one of those cases, that the mitigation efforts are truly working. And so we'll work with those states, and in some cases it'll make perfect sense for them to work together
Let you know ahead
on
of
a
time
regional
what they were
basis.
planning?
We
But
don't know that.
but
You
the
don't
president the president
You
will
don't know
be.
that.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear your question.
All right, can you tell us, did they let you know?
No, you made a mistake if you don't know that.
Did the
I
West
didn't
Coast
hear you. I
states-
didn't hear
And
the
we would,
statement.
and
I'm
we
sorry.
would like to have their cooperation, and we are going to have their cooperation. They will cooperate perfectly. Watch.
And let me just affirm what the president said. We heard it again today in what I think was our 9th conference call with governors. Is I think every American would be proud to see the partnership that this president has forged with governors across the country. I mean, it is an extraordinary statement, and you'll see some data when Admiral Polovchek gets up in just a few moments. But the flow of resources from around the world that we've moved into areas that have faced challenges. I mean, this president has directed us to ensure that every state has what they need when they need it. And the spirit that I heard again from Republicans and Democrat governors today was reflective of that partnership. And as we move forward to the president's goal of reopening America, we expect the same kind of partnership in the interest of the nation.
All right, go ahead with the new face mask. Go ahead.
Sir, if you can hear me through the mask.
Barely.
Can you...
I hear you well.
The District of Columbia argues that they were shortchanged in the most recent funding bill because they were treated as a territory instead of as a state. Will that be made right in Phase 4?
Well, we're looking at that, certainly. I heard that complaint, but the mayor seems to be very happy with everything we've done. I mean, she's actually, and she was on today saying very good things. Okay, yeah, go ahead, in the back.
Yeah. Mr. President, you talked about this being the most difficult decision that you are going to have to take about whether to reopen the economy. I wonder how much it weighs on your mind the thought that if there is a second wave, you've reopened the economy and you might have to shut things down again.
It does, and I hope that won't happen. I certainly hope that won't happen, but it does weigh on my mind. Okay, in the back, go ahead, Kathleen. Go ahead.
Mr. President?
Go ahead, please.
Okay, thank you. A question for one of my colleagues who wasn't able to be here. China deployed an aircraft carrier into the South China Sea South China Sea this weekend amid claims by Chinese state media that COVID has reduced U.S. military readiness in the region. What kind of responses are you thinking of? Will you have a response to this action?
China has their own difficulties. We have a relationship with China that we're not happy with certain things that happened over the last period of time, as you know, and I've been very explicit on that. But we know all about that, and no, China is, we've seen what they did. We've seen many other things that they've done, both pro and con, and we'll be just fine.
Abbott said something earlier where you said that you were putting together the economic task force and that you thought that the recommendations were happening earlier than expected. Did you mean to suggest that it could be before May 1st that you start recommending?
I don't want to say that, but we're going to be putting out guidelines and recommendations fairly quickly, in a few days.
You're not ruling out that it would be before
I'm
May
not going to
1st.
say, but look, certain states are doing very well. Certain big parts of the country are doing very well. They're doing really very well. So we're going to be putting out recommendations and guidelines very soon. Steve?
New guidelines would they fit each area, or would they be a uniform
You're
set
going
of
to see,
guidelines?
I don't want to tell you now, but right now we have a very strong indication that we know pretty much, we have some good ideas. I also do want to get, we'll have video conference or at least a conference call with a lot of very good people having to do with certain fields, whether it's energy or whether it's entertainment and restaurants, et cetera, et cetera. We have to get people back into restaurants. We have to do what we have to do, whether it's deductibility or not, we'll see, but it should be deductibility. You'll get them back so fast. I mean, they used to have deductibility, the restaurant business, it was one of the hot businesses, and then they ended it a long time ago, many years ago, but we may need that to get people back into the restaurants. Please.
Yeah, Michelle Obama today got behind mail-in voting nationwide as a possible solution to what's been going on in the States. She said it shouldn't be a partisan issue. Have your advisors told you that could save lives?
Well, absentee ballot are you talking about?
But on a massive scale because of the coronavirus.
Well, I don't know what she did. I mean, I didn't see that. When did that happen today?
Yeah, today. She's back to nonpartisan group.
I wish her a lot of luck.
On Abbott Labs, you said you had long.
Yes, Mr. President,
Yes.
there's a little bit of confusion about your phone calls yesterday with President Putin. The Kremlin is saying that you discussed current issues of ensuring strategic security. That wasn't referred to in the White House readout. Can you
We
enlighten
discussed
us?
many things. We did discuss China. We discussed many different things, but it was primarily a call on the oil, as you can imagine. And they were very helpful in getting a stabilization price, a stabilization of the number of barrels. I think the number is going to be closer to 20, maybe 15, but closer to 20 than it is going to be to 10. And I think it was a very important call. I also spoke with the King of Saudi Arabia, and that was a very important call. And the bottom line is OPEC Plus. It's called OPEC Plus because there are other states, also other nations. We came to a very good agreement. Please.
You had.
Go ahead.
What was the part about strategic security? Was that...
I would say mostly we were talking about China. We were talking about their borders. And we were talking about our borders a little bit, our borders with Mexico, because as you know, Mexico was a big part of the deal. And Mexico, really, it was very complex from the standpoint of Mexico. It was not an easy deal for Mexico, and the president, we appreciated a certain amount of flexibility. But we talked about borders, we talked about China, talked about Mexico.
Security sounds more like arms treaties.
We did talk about the arms. Yes, we did. That was a very important part of the call, actually. Yeah, good point. Please.
So on Abbott Labs, you said testing is going great. We know that these machines have been sent to some of the governors, but some of them are saying they don't have the materials to actually conduct.
Well, they have to get
tests.
the material. You know, the governors have to get the material. Now, if they can't get it, they're going to see us. I'm talking about the local governments. I'm talking about governors have to get the material. Now, they have machines. In fact, we're going to go in. I asked Mike to go into it as soon as I leave. They have very powerful machines that they don't know they even have. I'm not talking about Abbott. I'm talking about the governors. They have machines that are used for this. You know what I'm referring to? Very big, very powerful machines where in a certain state's case, they're only using 10% of their capacity and they didn't know it. That happens to be Illinois. John, please.
Real quick, these 15-minute tests that you've sent out, these new ones that you had in the Rose Garden, they say, including Governor Sununu in New Hampshire, that they don't have the cartridges to actually conduct the test. So when will they get those cartridges?
What do you think the answer to that is?
Rapidly increasing the numbers.
rapidly increasing the numbers. Rapidly increases, well, pretty quickly.
They can do 50,000 a day.
Well, you have other machines where they can really work. And a lot of the states have the big machines that can do a lot. They didn't even know they had them. They didn't even know that they had them. And Mike is going to be talking about that.
And you remember you mentioned several weeks ago the Google was putting together that website where they would handle the drive-in testing.
Google and Apple.
Have you given up
Google
on
and Apple combination?
Have you moved past that?
A lot of people don't like it from the standpoint of constitutional rights. I mean, a lot of people don't like it, and some people think it's great. No, they are working on that, as I understand.
Testing website. Remember you said a
I know
website
that.
for
I know.
Google,
I know.
and it's only operating in I think 5 counties in California right now.
No, Google's looking at it, but Google is also working with Apple or looking at something. We have the greatest companies in the world looking at things that in a year from now, everything that we're looking at now is going to be obsolete. That's how good it is. We have things happening that are unbelievable. I saw a presentation today that I can't talk about yet, but it's incredible. Plus, I think they're doing, Tony, I think they're doing very well on the vaccines. They're working hard on the vaccines, and I think you'll have an answer for vaccines. I believe that there's some great things coming out with respect to that. Now, you need a testing period, but you're going to have some great things. Please.
Sir, on the contact tracing that Google and Apple are doing, so different subject on the contact.
No, this is the Google and Apple. I don't know if it's a partnership or what, but they're working on some.
Correct. So there was the one.
They're working on more than one element. They're working on a couple of different things. Google and Apple. Google is also working on something, as you know, having to do with testing. I believe they're doing that in a singular fashion.
So my question is not about the drive-through testing website, not that.
Okay.
On Google and Apple's contact tracing that they want to, they've got this process now where they can put, contact tracing on your phone. If you opt in, you can be alerted if you've been in contact with someone with the coronavirus. How do you feel about that?
Well, it's an amazing thing, but a lot of people have some very big constitutional problems with it. You know that. It's an amazing thing. And it would be, actually, as you know, other countries are thinking about using something similar, but not as good.
Which other countries are thinking about something similar?
I hear Singapore is. Now, Singapore had a little bit of a setback because they had a break, you know that, but they'll take care of it. I know the folks in Singapore, they're doing a great job, and they're going to put it back very quickly. But Singapore and other countries are looking at other things, and some countries are doing other things.
Would you prefer that Americans use some other
Well, I don't want to
system?
get into that because we have a whole constitutional thing. We have more of a constitutional problem than a mechanical problem. But we will be making a determination on that. That's something we're going to be discussing with a lot of people over the next 4 weeks. That would be a very accurate way of doing it, but a lot of people have a problem with it. Yeah, please, go ahead.
A testing question, maybe for Dr. Fauci as well. Can you talk about where the antibody test is and how quickly
Well, it's
that
moving
will-
along. I think I can speak because I have to leave. Moving along quickly, moving along well. It's a test that's been going along for many, many years, except now we have very modern, very incredible versions of it. But that's moving along. The antibody test, moving along very well. Okay, any more COVID-19? COVID-19.
One soldier on the
Steve?
Theodore Roosevelt has died. Have you determined the status of Captain Crozier, the former?
Well, that's going through the Navy, as I understand it. The Navy is going to be making decisions on all of that. And they had a break-in. I don't think the ship should have been stopping in Vietnam when you have a pandemic, to be honest with you. I don't think the captain should have been writing letters. He's not Ernest Hemingway, as I said before, and he shouldn't have been writing letters. And I don't know who gave the orders to stop in Vietnam, but they stopped in Vietnam, and all of a sudden they get on, and now you have over 500 sailors and people on the ship that are affected. I don't know whose idea that was, but that wasn't such a good idea in the middle of a pandemic. Yes, please.
I have a question
John, go ahead.
Just one last on this question of constitutionality. I'm just wondering what changed your view, because
Nothing changed it. No, I know exactly what you're going to say. Nothing changed it. The fact that I want to rely on states, or maybe will, or maybe have, and the fact that we've gotten, that's one thing. The fact that I don't want to use the power is another thing. Look,
from the standpoint of the Constitution,
yes, Constitution.
you thought it should be up to the
Constitutionally,
governors.
you can look at constitutionally, you can look at federalism, you can look at it any different way. John, the fact that I don't want to exert my power is much different. We have the power. Does the federal government have the power? The federal government has absolute power. It has the power. As to whether or not I'll use that power, we'll see. I would rather, John, I would rather work with the states because I like going down to a local government. That's why with, I guess it's now 7 states, not 8, because South Carolina did, they went away from what we discussed the last time. So That's why I looked at the individual states. They're doing a very good job. They're really doing a very good job. I'd rather have them make the decision. Now, the fact that I'd rather have, that's fine, but I have the absolute right to do if I want to. I may not want to. We have a very good relationships. Now, we'll see what happens. If you notice, the few states you're talking about, they're all with Democrat governors. But if governors are doing a good job and they control it better, because you don't have somebody in Washington saying, set up a testing site in the parking lot of a Walmart. And we're in Washington and they're in a state that's very far away. That's really, it should be, and it should have always been, and I've always said it was. But the relationship we have now with the states and governors is very good. And we'll be announcing over the next very short period of time exactly what we're going to be doing. Okay, a couple of more. Go ahead.
On coronavirus and Joe Biden, he's the presumptive Democratic nominee. Do you have any plans yet on when you'll start sharing, or when the White House will start sharing some of that information about the coronavirus, your presidential
Well, nobody's
data?
called about coronavirus, about from their standpoint. Look, they had the H1N1, which is swine flu, and that was a big failure. That was a tremendous failure. They had a lot of failures, and you take a look at the history, and 17,000 people died, and you talk about late. They were so late. They were late like it never even existed. That was a big problem. Caused a lot of other people a big problem too. So if Joe Biden would like a briefing, I'd certainly get him a briefing. I don't know what he'd do with it. Yeah, please.
Are Jared and Ivanka serving on the new task force, and how are you going to balance what?
No, they're not. No. Yes, go ahead, please.
I want to clarify. So, in earlier conversation, there was a description of multiple different councils or task forces. Can you just explain exactly what the structure
Well, you
is and who
have
is going
Mike's
to be
task
on it?
force, which is the White House task force, which really brought us up to this point brilliantly, I must say. Dealt with governors all the way through, and I was on many of those calls, and every call got better and better and better. It was hostile at the beginning. By the time we finished, I mean, today's call was a very good call, very friendly call. I think everyone's online. And again, you don't have anybody driving you crazy saying they're not getting ventilators, they're not getting all of the different things. They need more beds. They have a lot of beds right now. And we always erred, I think it's important, we always erred on the sake of give them more, even when we didn't think. We didn't think New York needed the beds that they were asking for. We didn't think they needed the ventilators that they asked for. And we were right. Now, on ventilators, we're ready to march. I told you this. We're ready to march. We have 10,000 ventilators. We're ready to move them anywhere in the country where we need them, if we need them. We're also building a lot of ventilators, and that's going to be used at some point. I believe, we're going to have stockpiles, including state stockpiles, if they want to work out some kind of an arrangement with us. But we're also going to help other countries, whether it's Italy or Spain or France is having a big problem. They all desperately need, Germany too, they need ventilators. So we're going to have a lot of ventilators. We have a lot, you heard the numbers, we have a lot coming next week. Next week we have a tremendous amount coming. Okay, final question, Steve.
I'd ask about how the task force is going to be structured. Is it one?
No, then we have, in addition to that, we have a number of committees. We'll have a transportation committee. We're going to have a manufacturing committee. You'll see it tomorrow. We're also having a religious leaders committee. We have a great group of religious leaders. We're having committees with religious leaders. You've been seeing what's going on at the churches and all of that. And we're going to have a faith leaders committee. And so we're going to have a few committees, I'll call them committees, and then ultimately we're going to make decisions. So we're going to make decisions fairly quickly, and I think they're going to be the correct decision. I hope so, Steve.
Form the economic task force tomorrow. When do you want them to have recommendations for you?
Soon. And they already know what I want. And so when you say form, I don't have to give them instructions. These are very sophisticated people. These are the best people in their fields. So I don't have to say, gee, we just met and we're going to meet in 2 weeks and here's what I said, here's what I want. We've already told them. And they're the best names in the various businesses and professions and religions. I mean, these are the greatest names, the people that I think probably know the best. So we've called them, and we're going to be speaking to them very soon. And we want them to have, if it's questions or statements, we want them to have that for us. And we will have either response or maybe, ideally, we're going to be learning from them, and we'll be able to do that and put put everything we learned from those calls into our new guidelines. So we're going to have new guidelines coming soon. I think it's going to be very good. I think it's going to be very smooth, and I hope it's going to be very safe. Thank you all very much.
Thoughts on
Thank
Stanley
you.
Shearer's?
Thank you.
Any thoughts on
Stanley Scherer is a friend of mine for a long time. He's a great real estate person. Passed away, was a great real estate person. Great. Sort of a legend in New York real estate. He called me a couple of weeks ago, said he's tested positive. Stanley's in his early to mid 80s, I guess. And Stanley went to the hospital, and he never came out. He went into a coma. He was unconscious for a long period of time, and he never made it. A great man. He left very charitable, really a great philanthropist, a very, very successful person in Manhattan in the real estate business. So I got to know him a lot. He was so excited when his friend from New York became the president of the United States. He was like a young boy. And he was not a young boy, but he was like a young boy. He was so excited. He thought we'd do such a good job, and he was so happy. And he was very proud of what we've done in this administration. But he was tested positive, and unfortunately, he didn't make it. To me, it's a very sad thing. Thank you all very much. Thank you.